Cool. Thanks for coming down close. Again, I'm Jeff. I'm one of the directors and the cinematographer on the film. So if you guys have any questions, have any curiosities about the rodents, yeah, right there. If they're really cornered, they can supposedly break your finger with their teeth, but they are so skittish of people. And this was actually like a huge problem for filming it because I had spent a lot of time like trying to get close-up shots of nutrias, which are extremely challenging. Like anytime you get them close at them at all, they flee. So you're on a boat and you're trying to, and they hear the motor and they're just out of there. And even in that zoo in New Orleans, I actually got into the pen with them, and they would just like flee from me wherever I went. And so toward the end of the production, we actually had, we found someone that had a trained nutria. And so her name is Nudie the Nutria. She has a Facebook page, and she's our animal performer in the film. And that's how we were able to get a few extra close-up shots of the nutria. So that was kind of difficult without her in the end. So very helpful. Yeah.
I'm a freelance journalist.
Yeah.
The top fellow.
Sure.
This movie reminded me in some ways of Blackfish in the way that it's using documentary in kind of a horror movie trope.
Yeah.
Is that something that you were cognizant of or going for when making the film?
Not when making the film. I think when we started getting into like the poster design and stuff like that, we were more like, okay, let's kind of embrace this a bit, but it wasn't our initial kind of intention, and we pushed a little more in that direction. And then things like we did like the thing with the tunnels and the opening and stuff. So I think toward the end we had a little bit more of that, but it wasn't our original intention. No, actually I think we had intended it to be a little bit more lighthearted of a film in a way than it was. And maybe this is like previous projects have been like that, where it's like, okay, and so I think it was a bit more serious than we were actually expecting. So
yeah, it ends on a much more lighthearted note than I think I was expecting, which might speak to what you were going for, what you ended up making. Can you talk a little bit about how you got there, or why you decided to end the film on that note after this earlier, not quite gloom and doom, but more dire presentation of what nutria represented and what global warming represented for the coastline?
Yeah, I think I've always had the attitude, and with previous films as well, is like, well, humor is just a great, or having a lighthearted, look at these like horrible things can actually like help people like deal with it in a better way. And I think it also embraces what people in Louisiana are like. And I think in the way that the film is a reflection of that, which is, they can go party and have a good time and still be talking about, the hurricanes and things. It's like, it's almost like their way of coping with tragedy is often like with this kind of joyful, joie de vivre kind of, joy for life, attitude. So I think that was inherent in the subject matter in a way, but I think it also is partly, maybe our approach on it too, where it's just like trying to look for the positives and things, and it's more of like a counterpoint. It's like, okay, there is these horrible things, and so I think there was both, yeah.
After spending time making this documentary, do you feel optimistic about the situation?
No. No, it's pretty dire, really. It's really actually, yeah, they have controlled the nutria quite well. They used to be 25 million or so. Now we're down to a few million, and the bounty program is incredibly successful, but it's never going to eradicate the nutria by any means. And Louisiana loses a football field an hour to the Gulf of Mexico. It's like crazy. Like if you look at a map of Louisiana, what actually Louisiana looks like, it's just full of holes, and a lot of that land isn't coming back. And there are efforts by the government to build up land, and now that the nutria are actually reduced to a manageable level, they can start doing a lot more of that, where they have these there's actually some in the end of the film, you can see these like plastic barriers as Thomas is bringing in his load, and it's like what they're trying to do there is they put up plastic and they try to build land back, and then they put plants that hold that land together. But with it, even with the nutrient check, it's really kind of a a really hard uphill battle, and as much as the only thing they can really do is just try as hard as they can to kind of subside, bring back the land loss a little bit. But and then there's things like the people selling the fur and the food and everything, and I think those are interesting, inventive ways that people have tried to deal with the problem. But like when you get into it, it's just like it's really a difficult sell, and I think that's has to do with food and clothing are both these, wearing a dead animal and what you eat are both very emotional things, and I think it's a really hard sell to get people to consume it or to wear it. So and actually the collective righteous fur that's in the film, we had premiered the film in New Orleans a few weeks ago, and they had seen it for the first time, and they had also kind of come to the realization that their kind of time was over in a way, and so they had kind of lost some funding, and they had some government funding to do that, and so they've kind of resigned to not continue. So so it's a depressing situation, realistically. I think that we're very optimistic about the nutrient control program. That is definitely a success, but I think that there are things like there's just land loss that's just not going to be recovered, and
structural global warming.
Yeah. And it's not just the nutrient by any means, and we don't really get in. We hint at that, and it's like, but yeah, there's going to be there's sea rise. There's things like saltwater intrusion into areas. So we talk about the Army Corps of Engineers, and they're a little bit, and basically because of drilling, because of oil companies, or rerouting the Mississippi River and things like that, there's been like saltwater intrusion into areas that basically kill plants, and those are the plants that hold land together. So nutria is a huge factor, but there's also other factors that are working against them as well. So yeah, it's not a positive situation, but I think that they do a very good job of what they have been able to do, and the nutrient control program is definitely a huge success, though, even though they'll never really get rid of them. So yeah.
Do we have any questions back here? Any comments? Oh.
How and when did you get the idea and started on this project?
How long, you said?
Yes. When did you get the idea? And
I think the process of filming it was about 4 years, or making the film was about 4 years, and we had the idea years before then, and thought it was an interesting subject, and actually pitched it as a short film, and that didn't work out. And then I met Quinn, who's another director on the film, and he had gone down to New Orleans and met someone that worked in the nutrient control program, and he just thought, oh, this is a fascinating subject, so we decided to work on it together. So it is something that I had kind of been toying with before, and it took a few years to kind of actually get to doing the film. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering how you found Mr. Gonzalez, and if you knew he would be so central as you were filming.
We did not know at all. We were talking to a lot of people that knew nutria hunters, and one of the best ways to meet nutria hunters is to hang out at the tail collection sites. So that when the people bring in their tails, you just kind of hang out in the parking lot, and people come in, and you just can get an immediate read on if people are interesting or not. And we had met some people through that. And this one guy, he's like, I'm a really good nutria hunter, but if you want to talk to the king of the nutria hunters, you got to talk to Thomas Gonzalez. And so that's when we heard about Thomas, and we had gone down on our first trip. And I think what you see in the film is when he's going around and showing his freezers on the levee and stuff. That's like day 3 of shooting, and that's like after we've spent like 20 minutes with him, and he takes us on his boat like immediately, and he gets kind of emotional, and he tells us all these things, and we just knew immediately that this guy is really engaging. But I think we started doing some fundraising, and we'd show clips of Thomas, and everyone was immediately engaged with him. And he's also just really like the perfect documentary subject in a way, because he's so he doesn't really care that you're making a movie about him. Like, he's completely pure guy. Like, there's no ego. It's not like, look at me, people are so interested in me because, they're making a movie about me. He doesn't really care. And so he kind of is this authentic person, and he's also very helpful. Like, he always is willing to, take you out and stuff. And that's a lot to ask, because like, you go out crabbing with someone or you go out nutrient hunting, and they're going to get less than they would normally, because you're kind of slowing them down a little bit, when you're filming and everything. So he was just great in his authenticity and his just helpfulness. And the more we just kept, we would shoot for a while, like a week or so, and then come back and then edit, and then we would figure out, okay, they'll put scenes together, and like, is this person worth pursuing more? And so Thomas was immediately like, this guy's interesting, but as the production went on more and more, we just decided, like, this guy is really like the central thread of the film. And so we did more with his family and with his son Tommy and everything. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can just talk about when you were making the film, where did your allegiances lie in terms of, were you ever sympathetic to the nutria, or were you rooting for the hunters, or were you ever rooting for these little running away animals, or like, how was that for you as a documentarian?
Yeah, it was an interesting process, and I think that I hope that we get that in the film, where it's a complicated thing. Like, you go down there and you're just like, this is a scourge and these things are horrible, and then you kind of see them up close, like in having Nudie the Nutria, the animal actress, like, you get to you hold her in your hands and you're petting this creature, and it just like, you get a lot of sympathy there, or just seeing them, the people that have them as pets and things. And so, or just the way it's been integrated into the culture, like the baseball mascot and things like that. So I think it's complicated, and I don't know what my allegiances would flip flop, I guess, in a way, or I would just kind of see like, this is, there's no clear, winner here or hero, in a way, and I feel like they're both justified in that, someone like Thomas, or the people that fight for their land, like, they are fighting for their livelihood, and these nutrients are destroying them. But then the nutrients, like, they didn't ask to be brought here, you know what I mean? Like, they're just trying to survive too. And I think that in that final scene, we had been asking Thomas some kind of more final questions, like, what does the future hold and things like that. And he just, just off the top of his head busted out with the whole, like, the nutria is my buddy, and, we're both survivors. And I think, that, he just came up with that, but it really, I think, captured our own feelings of how we feel about the situation, which is, we kind of like rooting for both in a way. So, and I definitely don't see the nutria as the scourge as a lot of people make them out to be, but I think that's what we were trying to do with the film, is like show both sides of it, where there's like this lighthearted aspect, and where the nutria is becoming a baseball mascot and all these things, but it's also like has this horrible impact as well. So
was that last shot of the nutria your nutria actress?
Yeah, that's Nudie, yeah, and then in the tunnels as well. So but we had Thomas had said that whole line about if it was just me and my wife and the nutrients, that it would be big K and we'd be dancing and have a good time. And, so again, that's from that same time. And I think he was just in a very philosophical mood. And we're just like, oh, we had them dancing already. So the thing is we'd shot the dancing scene like 2 years before or so. And so we had them dancing, and we always had been using the footage, and we're like, okay, how are we going to use this exactly? And then it was like, once he said that line, we're like, okay, if we could get the nutria in the scene, so have them put on the same clothes, and like, can you dance again? And we're going to get the same light. And so I was waiting for the light to, the sunset to kind of match the thing. And then Thomas and Joan would keep getting really bored, and they're just like, stop dancing. And I'm like, no, keep dancing. And I was like, the editor Quinn was laughing, because he's like, you keep yelling at them to start, keep dancing. And then Nudie wouldn't turn her head right, and the animal trainer's like, the sun's going down. And it was like, there's probably 20 takes of that thing. But I think it captures, the shot is set up, but I think it's like the spirit of what Thomas is saying is what we were trying to, convey. And then we edited the scene, and then we put it together, and then we actually realized that Thomas had built a workshop on the middle of his house. So in the beginning of the scene, it's not there, and then you cut away, and it's a continuity error. but yeah, so that's how we did that part. Yeah. But pretty much everything else is, you know, except for a few things with the nutria, is just, you know, kind of how it happened, really. So they're in the Chesapeake Bay and Maryland a bit, and I think they've dealt with that situation pretty well. They're also in Oregon quite a bit, and so and they just showed up in California, actually. So they were eradicated from California, I think, for like the last 40 years or so, and they've just recently popped up, and so they're kind of freaking out about that. So we'll see what happens there. So I think they're kind of going to Louisiana for some advice on how to deal with it. So, and yeah. And our animal control guy, Michael Brand, who's in the movie on the golf course, he's like a good friend, and he's come to a lot of screenings and stuff, and he's just like, oh, they're not handling it right. They're not using the right traps and everything. So he has a lot of opinions on how California should handle the nutria problem. But yeah, so those are the main places, and then the Gulf Coast, there's a lot, like Texas and, you know, bordering areas of Louisiana, but yeah.
Jeff, I know you're going up to Yale tomorrow night,
Yeah.
and you're going to be speaking at the School of Environmental Studies. How much of this is being used by science teachers, both, you know, in middle, high school, and college level, to really teach this whole issue of man versus nature, and how do we control our environment? I mean, it was pretty shocking to see how far the nutria had gone to Korea, Vietnam. I mean, this is a worldwide issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of countries that deal with nutria. The Russians have been particularly good because it's fashionable to eat nutria burgers now in Moscow, apparently. So it all kind of depends on the country and how they deal with it. But yeah, it's not only is it a worldwide issue with nutria, it also, invasive species in general are kind of, you can apply that issue to a lot of different places, you know, whether that's invasive plants or, Asian carp or different things that people deal with in different parts of the country. So I think that even if you don't have nutria in your backyard, the film is instructive, in those ways, and like, okay, how do you deal with these problems? And yeah, we've had a lot of interest from universities or in education, but I think especially as we wrap up, there's a whole educational market for the film that I think that it could be used quite a bit in that way. So. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we just had actually a teacher in Louisiana contact us just a few days ago about bringing it into the classroom. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do a lot with that. So.
And tell us about how you financed the picture.
In the beginning, it was just frequent flyer miles and doing it on our own. And then we got some film grants, various smaller grants over time. And then I think 2 years into the project, we got funding from ITVS, which is a arm of PBS. And so their mission is to fund films that represent, underseen communities. And so they were able to provide the entire budget for the rest of the film. So that was a huge blessing, and especially at the end of the film when you have things like color correction or sound, like we were able to mix it Skywalker sound and do all these things that, having a budget allowed us to do. And so, and then they also, help promote the film for TV. So we're going to be on the show Independent Lens early next year on PBS, so for national broadcast. So it'll be a shorter version than what you see here. So there's a few things missing, but it'll be great to have that exposure in terms of having it in a national, broadcast. So.
It shows, because we do show a lot of documentaries here, and the editing and the cinematography were outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I know it costs money, so it was beautiful. You were the cinematographer, right?
Yeah. So I shot everything.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it also helped a lot. Like we had like people, the community was so supportive and so giving, and like we had a donor that would just allow us to use her house whenever we wanted to, whenever we staying there. So it's like, you get connected with the community, but it's also just helps, the support in that way. So yeah.
If no one has any other questions, what's nutria taste like?
It's like a rabbit, I would say. I mean, that would be, some people say like a dark turkey, but it can be done very well. Like, it all depends on who cooks it. So everything in the film that you see cooked, we ate. So Kermit Ruffins did a 6-pack of beer, a beat of beer and spices, and that was good in its own way. And then Susan Spicer, she said it reminds her of pork, and so she wanted to do an Asian stir fry, is what she's doing in the film. And so they're very different in the way that they tasted, but both excellent. We'd actually, when we were raising money for the film, we did a Kickstarter campaign. Oh, that's another source of funding, actually. But we had, on Kickstarter, you have these different incentives. And so one of the incentives we had was Nutria sausages. And for some reason, that didn't go over very well. Like, not many people chose that funding level. And as a result, we had Nutria sausage in our freezer for many years, and we just got rid of it recently. Because of that, we'd actually attempted to cook it ourselves. And so we did like a jambalaya with it and everything, and that did not taste very good. And I think that's really has more to do with our cooking skills than. Yeah. Which is scary, gross. What do you mean a jump? Like? Why are people so accepting of eating rabbit and not nutria when really they're super close? Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, and like for me personally, I don't really get bothered by it. Like I was like, yeah, when can I taste nutria? Like I will take the first opportunity I can, and then then there's people that live in Louisiana. Like there's a woman around Kermit Ruffin's Grill, and she's like, I'm not gonna eat that, and she just like and she got a little drunk, and then she eventually like ate it in the end, and then she really liked it. And I was talking to her, and she's like, she eats raccoon, right? And I'm like, a raccoon is a scavenger. Like I would not want to eat a raccoon, and yet you're not going to eat something that's vegetarian, that's like away from civilization, it's pure, totally clean meat. It's like actually in some ways makes more sense than like factory farm chicken or something like that. You know what I mean? There's no chemicals and stuff. So I really wish I knew the answer to that question, because for me it makes total sense, and I think it tastes good. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's just this image thing of it has this tail that looks like like a sewer rat, even though that it really has nothing. And what we eat crab. A crab is one of the most awful looking creatures you could imagine, and it's like somehow that's acceptable. And so really, I find it a really curious question, and I've always struggled with why people are so repulsed by it. Because if you really think about it, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It just somehow has this association. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of just like maybe it's because it's kind of alien in the teeth, and it's just not what people. Yeah, I don't know, and I think that there's just something with rats, the association of like disease. Like I've gotten the question many times. Like people are like, "Well, did they carry disease and stuff?" And it's like, no, they don't. It's just there's such a strong association just because of this tail, and it doesn't really make any sense. But the wetlands of Louisiana would be happy if more people ate nutria. That's for sure. But what's that? Not that I'm aware of. No, no, they're pretty. Yeah. Yeah, they're not really that big of a problem. They just want to be left alone and keep breeding. That's what and eating roots. That's what they do. So yeah, there's just something. Yeah, I think it's just they're unfamiliar, and it's that tail thing. So yeah, but they actually tried to. They have the Nutria for Human Consumption campaign that we put a little bit in the movie, and that didn't go very well. They're getting different chefs to have recipes, but they also tried to serve it in the public school system in New Orleans, and I think just people even when you're from there, they're like so still kind of disturbed that you'd be eating this animal. So it's strange. But then I also like back in the day, lobster was like a throwaway thing. Like you wouldn't eat lobster. So it's like, is that just a matter of like things change and we have different perceptions and stuff, so then we have to start eating nutria because there's something else? I don't know. But yeah, it's very interesting. Anyone else? Or?
Just before we wrap it up, tell us about your next project.
There's nothing. We're doing a commission thing right now about the ceramicist Edith Heath, who's like a designer from the 50s, late 40s and 50s, but that's more like it was a commission thing, and so just doing that now. But there's no real plan for the kind of next feature really at the moment. So just going to probably do a lot of short things, which are nice because they finish up and they don't take 4 years to do. So maybe take a little break. So.
Well, any more questions before we wrap up? Well, let's give Jeff a big round of applause from the Avon.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
Yeah, thanks for making it through from the rodents. I hope it wasn't too disgusting. It's so funny because I think people, sometimes it's that butchering scene that people get a little bit put off by, but usually if people make it through, it's okay. Cool. Cool, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Cool, thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks.